Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Q&A. This week's question is about raising teenage daughters. How to find balance between constantly telling them what to do and disciplining and being their friend and building trust. I can look back now and know that my parents wanted the best for me, but at the same time they seemed overprotective and stern. So, I want to say before I start that, of course, I'm no kind of an expert. All I am is a parent who's raised 3 teenage daughters, and somebody who observes keenly what's going on in our society, the changes through which we're going through, what it means today to be a woman, a mother, a parent, and I dare to ask difficult questions. So what I'm going to be saying is just my own observation. It's also a result of my own analysis and many conversations with other women and men and children that I've been having over these years. So, of course, the institution of parenting is based mostly on fear, right? We have these fragile beings, these children that come to us without any kind of manual. We come to our parenting, most of us, with the best of intentions, and quickly realize that this is a very overwhelming role and a very difficult project, because we really don't know. And no matter what ideas we have about what is good or bad or right or wrong that we've inherited from our own families or from society or culture in which we were raised, at least in my experience, I was quickly confronted with the fact that my children were just not going to cooperate. So, of course, our children are unique beings. Another thing that is important to understand is that our children will be living in a world that is vastly, radically different from the world in which we were raised and in which we live. So it's important to understand that the way we ourselves were raised, which was to repeat the lessons and the values of our own parents, the way things have always been done before. Our ancestors who've come through wars and scarcity and all kinds of fears that were passed on to us, were fear of the unknown, fear of other people. It's really not going to be very valuable for our children, because our children already live in a world that is globally connected. And as we've seen with our current predicament, with COVID pandemic, that we're all completely connected right now. Our economy, our lives, our cultures are completely interconnected. So we need to raise children with a certain openness, curiosity, and willingness to know other people, other cultures, and not reject them, but accept them, and at least to tolerate and to allow them to be, even if they're different from what we know and what we're used to. Another thing that is important to understand is that right now, a lot of our decisions as grown-ups, and that's all my own life and everybody I observe around me, as well as people who are in my coaching practice, one of our biggest sources of discomfort, anxiety, and panic is the unknown future. And what keeps us small, what keeps us from reaching our potential, is staying in the familiar, the need to stay in the familiar, the need to stay in what we know. Well, this is not going to work for the future generations, because the future generation is going to live in a vastly different world. They will have to deal with a lot of unknowns, and they need to learn to be at ease with that. So how can we be at ease with what we don't know? That means we need to be ready to form our own judgments, discernment, and decisions. That we need to rely increasingly on our own sense of value, sense of right or wrong, discernment, and ability to rely on our inner resources. So not so much relying on what's been done before, or even see what's happening around us and what other people are doing. Learn to collaborate, yes, of course. Learn to communicate with people in a non-violent way. But really, mostly, self-reliance will become much more needed and necessary for our children than it was for us. We were still driven very much by what is everybody else is doing and sort of trying to fit in. And the whole institution of parenting is based on that need to create conformists, people who will follow the rules, who'll get married by a certain age, who'll do a certain profession, who will have children by a certain age. And we still judge every time somebody makes a different kind of decision. So, really removing ourselves from the need to be guided by fear or by our own sense of what is right and wrong, I think is important. I think too, especially since we're talking about teenage daughters here, I think it's very, very important to speak about bodies, to let our girls understand that they're perfect just the way they are, that there isn't a standard in which they need to fit, that everything is beautiful, and that everything, all of the features of their bodies are part of nature, and there is nothing wrong with that. So already that kind of acceptance of self, acceptance of their differences, acceptance of their diversity is extremely important. And then allowing them space to be themselves, allowing them space to decide what is important for them, what makes them happy, what brings them joy. Not judge their choices as to what they want to learn, because as we see already, there will be a number of industries that will not survive in the future. And there will be, also industries that will be formed that we cannot even imagine at this stage yet. So our children will be living in a world that we cannot really teach them about. So the only, I would say, the accent we need to place in our conversations with our children is to give them as much autonomy as possible. So feeling of safety within their bodies, feeling of safety in self-reliance, that they will make the decisions that are right for them in the moment. When we're connected to our bodies, when we're connected to our intuition, when we understand that we're the only ones that are the real authority in our lives, that is probably the biggest gift that we can give to our children, because then they will be able to, no matter what situation they will find, they will be able to be in that self-reliance. And of course, you will tell me that there are laws and there are rules by which society lives. Yes. So respect of certain rules of cooperation, collaboration, working with people who are very different from us, communicating in a nonviolent manner. All of these are important factors. And as far as us parents, it's really learning to accept our children just the way they are, not seeking to create mini-me's, because it's just impossible. And of course, there will be traits of character that we'll find familiar and perhaps more endearing than others. But we need to be able to create, raise, allow people who can think independently for the future, and who can live in empathy with other people, and not expect and not want to only speak to people who are like them, to really allow diversity and tolerate differences, accept them, embrace them, because the world that they will be navigating is very, very different. And it's very important that they have the skill to think independently, out of the box, and to form their own opinions, and to not be afraid to offer them, and to bring themselves forward into the world without needing to hide pieces of who they are. So I hope this was helpful. I'm going to try to keep these short so that I can post them easily. See you next week.